In 60 seconds, a foreign woman did something that no disciple, no Pharisee, and no religious leader had ever managed to do before. She changed Jesus' mind. At least, that's what it looked like to everyone watching. The Canaanite woman's daughter was dying, and when she begged for help, Jesus gave her the cold shoulder, something completely out of character for the man who never turned anyone away. What happened next didn't just shock his disciples. It rewrote the entire understanding of who deserves God's grace. The sun beat down on the road between Tyre and Sidon, ancient Phoenician cities where Jewish teachers rarely ventured. This was Gentile territory, the land of the uncircumcised, the unclean, the outsiders. Jesus had come here deliberately, seeking rest after endless crowds in Galilee had drained him physically and emotionally. He needed silence. He needed space to think, to pray, to breathe. But there was something no one knew yet. A woman had been watching the road for days. Not a Jewish woman, a Syrophoenician, a Greek-speaking descendant of the ancient Canaanites whom Israel's ancestors had fought for generations. In her culture, in her blood, in her very identity, she represented everything Jewish law taught people to avoid. But none of that mattered now. Her daughter was dying. Not physically dying, though that might have been easier to explain. The girl was possessed by a demon. For months, maybe years, the mother had watched her child suffer seizures, speak in voices that weren't hers, hurt herself in ways no child should. The local priests had tried their rituals. The Greek physicians had offered their theories. Nothing worked. The demon remained, and her daughter's eyes grew emptier with each passing day. Then she heard the rumors. A Jewish healer had crossed into Gentile territory. A man who cast out demons with a word, who commanded evil spirits, and they fled. His name was Jesus, and he was somewhere near Tyre. And this is exactly where everything changed. She found him trying to enter a house quietly, his disciples forming a protective barrier. But she pushed through, desperation overriding all social protocol, all cultural boundaries, all fear of rejection. "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me." The title caught everyone off guard. Son of David was a distinctly Jewish messianic title. How did this Gentile woman know to use it? Had she been studying their prophecies? Did she understand what she was claiming, that this Jewish teacher was the promised deliverer of Israel? "My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." Her voice cracked on the word suffering. Every parent in earshot felt it, that primal fear, that helpless agony of watching your child in pain and being unable to stop it. The disciples shifted uncomfortably. They had seen Jesus heal so many. Surely this would be quick. Surely he would speak a word, cast out the demon, send her home rejoicing. But Jesus didn't speak. He didn't even look at her. He kept walking toward the house, his face set, his silence deafening. Wait a second. Don't miss this detail. She followed, calling out again, "Lord, please. Just one word. That's all I need. Just tell the demon to leave my daughter." Still nothing. Jesus' silence was deliberate, calculated, crushing. The disciples glanced at each other, confused. This wasn't like him. They had seen him stop for a bleeding woman in a crowd, delay a journey to speak with Samaritans, interrupt important meetings to touch children. Why was he ignoring this desperate mother? She kept calling, Her voice grew louder, more desperate, drawing attention from neighbors and passers-by. People began to stare. This was becoming a scene, a public spectacle. A Gentile woman chasing a Jewish rabbi through the streets, begging for mercy, while he refused to acknowledge her existence. Jesus stopped walking. He turned slowly, looking directly at the woman for the first time. Hope flared in her eyes. Finally, he would speak to her. Finally, he would help. What he said next shattered every expectation. "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Only to Israel, not to Gentiles, not to Canaanites, not to her. His mission had boundaries, and she stood outside them. This was the first time Jesus had ever publicly articulated a limitation to his ministry. The first time he had drawn a line and told someone they were on the wrong side of it. The disciples nodded approvingly. Finally, their teacher was setting proper boundaries. Finally, he was maintaining the distinction between Jew and Gentile that God himself had established. This was right. This was proper. This was how it should be. But the woman didn't leave. Instead, she did something unthinkable. She came closer. She fell at his feet in a position of absolute humility, absolute vulnerability, absolute desperation. "Lord, help me." 3 words, simple, direct. Stripped of all theological language, all messianic titles, all pretense. Just the raw cry of a mother whose daughter was suffering and who refused to accept that help wasn't available. But what was truly shocking came next. Jesus looked down at her kneeling form, and what he said would become one of the most controversial statements in his entire ministry. "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." The metaphor was clear and cutting. Children meant Jews, God's chosen people. Bread meant the blessings, healing, and miracles meant for them. And dogs. In Jewish culture, calling someone a dog was one of the worst insults possible. Dogs were unclean scavengers, contemptible creatures that ate garbage and lived in filth. He was calling her a dog, comparing her to an unclean animal, saying that giving her the healing she begged for would be like throwing food meant for beloved children to worthless dogs. The disciples watched with a mix of satisfaction and discomfort. This was harsh, even for setting boundaries. Several of them had witnessed Jesus show more gentleness to prostitutes and tax collectors. But this woman was Gentile, Canaanite, outside the covenant. Perhaps this level of rebuke was necessary. The woman's face registered the blow. Every person present expected her to stand and leave, humiliated, defeated, sent away with the clear message that she didn't belong, didn't qualify, didn't deserve help. What you've seen so far is nothing compared to this. But she didn't leave. Instead, she looked up at Jesus, this man who had just called her a dog, and smiled slightly. There was something in her eyes, not anger, not despair, something else, something that looked almost like cleverness. "Yes, it is, Lord." She agreed with him. She accepted the metaphor. She didn't argue with the hierarchy he'd established, didn't protest the insult, didn't demand equal treatment. She met him exactly where he was. But even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Silence. Complete, stunned silence. She had taken his metaphor and turned it completely around. "Yes," she was saying, "I'm a dog. I accept that. I'm outside the covenant, outside the chosen people, outside the primary recipients of your mission. But even dogs get fed in a good household. Even dogs receive the scraps that fall from the table. The children don't go hungry when dogs eat crumbs. There's enough for both. She wasn't asking him to abandon his mission to Israel. She wasn't demanding equal priority. She was simply pointing out that his power was so vast, his resources so abundant, that healing her daughter would cost him nothing. It would be a crumb, a leftover, something that wouldn't diminish what he came to do for Israel. And then Jesus did something no one expected. His expression changed. The sternness melted away, replaced by something that looked like admiration, even delight. He had been testing her, pushing her, seeing how far her faith would stretch, and she had passed spectacularly. Woman. The disciples leaned in. Was he going to send her away with a compliment? Tell her, perhaps, to try again later? Explain more clearly why he couldn't help? Woman, you have great faith. Great faith. The phrase hit like thunder. This was the same Jesus who constantly rebuked his own disciples for their little faith, their doubts, their failures to trust. And here was a Gentile woman, a Canaanite, a dog in Jewish eyes, being held up as an example of great faith. You won't believe what happened next. Your request is granted. Just like that. After all the silence, all the refusal, all the harsh words, instant approval. Complete reversal, total victory. Go. The demon has left your daughter. Present tense, already done. Not will leave or is leaving, has left. Past tense, accomplished. At that very moment, miles away, her daughter was being freed from years of torment. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She stood on shaking legs, bowing repeatedly. Words of gratitude tumbling out in a mixture of Greek and broken Aramaic. She had come expecting rejection, prepared for humiliation, willing to accept crumbs. And she was leaving with the full answer to her desperate prayer. She turned and ran toward home, her feet flying over the dusty road, her heart pounding with hope that barely dared to believe what Jesus had promised. But the real shock was happening among the disciples. They stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Jesus had appeared to refuse a desperate mother, had used harsh language, had seemed to reinforce every boundary between Jew and Gentile they'd been taught to maintain. And then he'd completely reversed course and granted her request. Why the test? Why the harsh words? Why make her work so hard for something he gave freely to Jews? As they continued walking, the answer began to dawn on them, piece by piece. Jesus hadn't been rejecting her. He'd been revealing her, drawing out a depth of faith that might have remained hidden if he'd simply granted her request immediately. He'd given her an opportunity to demonstrate persistence, humility, and cleverness, to show that her faith wasn't just desperation, but genuine understanding of who he was and what he could do. And in doing so, he'd taught his disciples something they desperately needed to learn. Faith wasn't limited by ethnicity, geography, or covenant status. A Gentile woman could have greater faith than the chosen people. An outsider could understand grace better than those who grew up in the temple. And this is where the deepest truth emerged. The woman reached her home as the sun began to set, her lungs burning from the run, her legs trembling with exhaustion. She burst through the door, expecting chaos, the screaming, the violence, the terrible voices that had become her daughter's prison. Instead, she found stillness. Her daughter lay on her mat, eyes closed, breathing peacefully. The neighbors who had been holding her down were standing back, staring in wonder. The girl's face, usually twisted in torment, was serene. As the mother approached, her daughter's eyes opened. Clear eyes, her own eyes, no demon, no voices, no convulsions. Just a young girl waking from sleep, confused about why everyone was staring at her. "Mama." Her voice was small, uncertain, her own voice for the first time in so long. The mother collapsed beside her, pulling her into a desperate embrace, tears soaking into her daughter's hair. The demon was gone, completely gone, not suppressed, not weakened. Gone. The moment Jesus had spoken miles away, her daughter had cried out once, then fallen into a peaceful sleep from which she'd awakened free. The disciples would never forget the woman who called Jesus Lord in Gentile territory. She had unknowingly stepped into a moment of profound theological significance. She had forced Jesus to articulate both the boundaries of his earthly mission and the limitless nature of faith. She had demonstrated that sometimes the greatest faith comes from the most unexpected sources, that persistence matters, that humility opens doors, and that God's mercy is bigger than any human category or restriction. And she had proven that sometimes, when God says no, it's only because he's waiting to give you something even better than yes. Her daughter would grow up free, healed, whole. And every time someone asked about the moment everything changed, the mother would smile and say, "I met a Jewish teacher who called me a dog, and that was the day I learned what real faith looks like."